same old starting place so that we know where we are and what's happening. All right. Well, I'm going to just, I'm literally just putting this up to remind ourselves as to what we did and just to have a look at it and see. I'm not going to go anywhere through it. Just to have a quick run through and see, did we cover everything? Did I cover everything? Are there any questions that you have on any of this that you want me to go through as we go along? So that was our first one. Are you okay with that? And you can write it down. I have factored in several more pauses today. You'll be glad to know. So this was our second one. General knowledge of post-medieval, and I hope that that you're comfortable with that and what we've done. Since then, I sent several pieces out to you, and I have to tell you, I've learned a great deal from what we've been doing. One of the questions that came up the last time was on the use of lead and lead glaze on pottery, and when did they figure out what the lead was doing? Well, in fact, it's led me to actually do a bit more research, but for which I'm very thankful. And it wasn't, believe it or not, until 1944 that the last case of lead poisoning was found in the Staffordshire potteries. And they had spent a great deal of time trying to deal with it. I found a very, very interesting article, which is easy to find and can be downloaded. And it's called The Successful Prevention of Lead Poisoning in the Glazing of Earthenware in the North Staffordshire Potteries. And it was 1963 in the British Journal of Industrial Medicine. Don't worry, I'll write it down somewhere else and share it around with you. And this person actually reviews all the information, and it dates it back to 1572, when there was an extensive epidemic of disease. And it is called colic, found in Poitou. Now it's interesting because Poitou will come up again in a couple of minutes. So basically it was lead being added to bad wine to make it sweet. Delicious. So they were getting lead into their system that way. But that was lead there, but it was known then that the lead in pottery was creating a great deal of difficulty. And so as it happens, literally last week, there was a piece on the Medieval Pottery Research Group Facebook page, which mentioned poisoning. So this one came from 1829. Last week, a family in Leicester, after partaking of soup for dinner, were all taken ill with symptoms of being poisoned. Upon inquiry into the cause, it was found to have proceeded from the soup having been suffered to remain by the fire several hours in an earthenware pipkin, whereby the poisonous qualities of the white lead and arsenic used in glazing and polishing the vessel had been imparted in the food. We are happy to add that the whole family are recovering. Okay, so it's extensive sitting in it and cooking in it. You can actually use it and eat from it, but to be very careful. And then having looked at that, and I went in to Google various different things, and I find this mention in the New York Post in 2022, where a family of 5 were struck by lead poisoning from ceramic pottery glaze. And the piece that's here is useful because it's detailing of what happens to the body. They were a Mexican family, and they were using their own Mexican familiar pieces of pottery that they had, and they were cooking and drinking from them. And all of them survived, and all of them are fine now, and they're not using the pottery any longer. But you can see how bad it is. And this is simply people who are actually eating from the pottery. And so I had, when I went to make my fruit for breakfast this morning, I took out my favorite glazed earthenware pot and realized there were cracks in it, and realized that I had bought it in America and it could possibly be Mexican, and now I will no longer be using it. I'm not cooking it or doing anything like that, but it is a word to the wary, and it is something to be very, very careful of. So this article in the British Journal of Industrial Medicine goes through the efforts that were made over a number of years to bring in parliamentary reforms and to take care of people. Children and women were especially affected by it. Women miscarrying progressively, I mean, on a regular basis, and children that might have been born dying very suddenly, straight afterwards, not surviving, being terribly poisoned, children being poisoned, and men becoming, they are looked at as gaunt and pale and shaky. And these are the ones mostly what are called the dippers. And the dippers are the people who dip the pot into the slip, into the glaze that you've seen in some pieces that I showed you. So pause before we go any further. Just to show you a cat. Cat wasn't originally in the picture, but I just want to show this to finish the sort of post-medieval section that we were discussing, because we're going into medieval. I'm sure there's a way of getting rid of this piece here, but it's probably not a good idea. I don't know who painted the picture, but up here you can see German stoneware jars, jugs hung on the wall. The interesting thing is these are highly decorated ones, and these are the type that we found in Ireland, but they're rarely found in England, believe it or not. Pewter plates, as you can see, and boards, or possibly, I think they're boards rather than anything else, and a small jar with glazing on it. Now, the reason for the glazing and the reason for the insistence on glazing is because the glazing with lead makes the pottery shinier, and so people will insist on having it. Another article that I found, in fact, on it is a case study, and again, you can find that on the website, on the Google, Frontiers in Toxicology. It was 2022 as well, lead levels, and they measured lead levels in these Mexican, it's not just Mexico, okay? There's quite a lot of various different, but they measured the Mexican ones, and they found that while there were non-lead glazes available, it was essentially the women who were agreeing to use non-lead ones and cut it out. But even at that, because most of the pottery is concentrated in a single area, people were still being poisoned by the being in the atmosphere of the material. I should say that in the successful prevention of lead poisoning, it was interesting to find that the employers were saying that the reason the workers were being poisoned by the lead poisoning was because they were dirty and lived in filthy conditions and didn't wash their hands when they were working, which is lovely. Thank you very much. And they were the last ones to try to clean it up. So are we okay with the first two that we've had, and the kind of ending up with the post-medieval, because I'm going to dive into the medieval. Any questions before we go any further? No. Okay. And thank you very much for reminding me to talk about the lead poisoning, and because it comes up now much more. Okay. So session 3, what we're trying to do today is have a general knowledge of medieval context, firstly. So it means you have to have a bit of history, a close identification of the principal medieval pottery types in Ireland. What, and again, illustration and photography, are you going to cover them? And then obviously that covers, what we have to look at is the retention and disposal of this type of pottery as well, how we quantify this material, And then at the end, we'll do a short session just on preparing for the license eligibility interview. Most of you may have your licenses already, but it's useful to have this knowledge, especially if you have a company, to be able to advise some of your people that are going for the interview, or anybody else that you know that there's a couple of things that would be useful. Okay, so it's useful sometimes to remind ourselves where we are on the European stage and how far we are from everything, okay? And the two places that you need to know for medieval pottery in Ireland are Bristol here, okay? Very simple, and it's very obvious as to where the pottery is coming from here, and Bordeaux in a general way, Bordeaux, but the west coast here of France. This is where the pottery is coming from as well. Yes, at a later stage, and sometimes in the medieval period, we get a little bit of Spanish, we get some Portuguese, we get a little bit of German, but the other thing to remember is that the Vikings that came to Ireland are coming from here. They're coming from Norway. So they're coming around this way and they're coming to Ireland. And the Norwegian Vikings, by and large, didn't use pottery either. So they arrived to us and they weren't bothered about it. They didn't have that Roman background either. The Danish Vikings are the ones that came to England. And thereby you have, in all our ring forts are called Danes forts. Okay. Why? Most of you know, but it's because when the Ordnance Survey did the survey of Ireland, they were used to doing the same thing in England, and they were Danes. They called them Danes forts. They assumed they were Danes forts. Of course, they're our own ring forts, and they're nothing to do with Danish, Norwegian, or even Swedish. The Swedes tended to go to Russia. So they go here and they go down to the Black Sea, and they have a very interesting pottery assemblage with them, okay? So, okay, this is a lot to take on just in the one thing, but this is basically a summary, and I did show it to you before. It's basically a summary of the unglazed wares. Now, don't worry about writing that down or doing anything with it. It's all on the sheets that I sent out to you originally. Okay, it's just a kind of a short note to remember the various different ones. And I'm using, although I probably shouldn't, I'm using the old term of beware. Ian Doyle would be very disappointed in me, but if you read his articles, he has done a huge amount of work, and a huge amount of work has gone on now with actually thin sectioning, chemical analysis, and tracking the material around the Mediterranean, Turkey, North Africa, and so on. But there's just too much to do, and I'm going to leave that to reading Ian's articles, because they're very clearly written, and he's updating those the whole time, okay? So they're pinpointing those ones, and that's been very helpful. E-ware is still quite difficult. There's more of it being found in Ireland because of all the excavations that are going on, principally road excavations, not road you know what I mean, road building, and thereby excavating. And there's less information coming out on that, other than still Western France, Western Gaul, and because they're not really pinpointing it in France as to where it's coming from either. Souterrain ware is a tricky one, because what we have of it is very prehistoric looking. The great lumpy, I shouldn't say that. That's very judgmental of pots that worked, okay? But they're generally bucket shaped rather than the sort of medieval shape that we are used to, that rounded shape that comes to us with the Anglo-Normans. So those are the three that we have in Ireland, and they're the ones that come in after that huge long gap, which I told you about, where there is no Roman, there's nothing with the people who arrived in Ireland and gave them Irish language. There's nothing coming in at that stage, and there's nothing made in Ireland. So there is a huge gap of approximately 1,000 years before material is made in Ireland. Quite extraordinary to a lot of different people. There's beware arrives in, eware arrives in, but it doesn't, as they say, take. Nobody seems to be interested in making it for themselves until suzerainware. And as I said to you, there is a suggestion that the influence and the suggestion of making suzerainware apparently comes from Scotland, which is difficult to understand because they didn't have Romans or pottery either. So there is work going on in suzerainware, and Cormac McSparran, and I sent you the information on that. And Google him, and he is writing on it. He's coming up with dates, but I still don't think the understanding and the influence of where it arrived has come in. Now, it does continue on for a considerable length of time, as you can see, 8th to the 13th century. And it's taken over by what he now calls, what Cormac now calls, medieval Ulster coarse pottery. It sounds even vaguer than what it was, but it's actually a better description of what the material is. It's in the medieval period, it's found in Ulster, and it's coarse. Now, going on to the 17th century, I would find that a bit difficult to call it medieval still, but anyhow, that's what he's decided to call it. The interesting thing is it remains hand-built and unglazed, and it's everted rimware. When you're reading the articles, you will come it up as in East Ulster, it's the everted rimware, and Cranogware in West Ulster. But he actually has studied it considerably and says they're basically the same thing. Now, in the Republic of Ireland, what becomes the Republic of Ireland, and that's the interesting thing, is that's where the division is. One is Ulster, and then Leinster cookingware, late 12th to the mid 14th century. And the first piece that I've put on it is the absolute essential sand gritted bases. Okay, that is your absolute telltale piece on it. And when we have the in-person pieces, I will have pieces that you can handle and see. There is no way you can mistake it for something else. Okay, mica and quartz, very evident on it. Hand-built, Leinster, cooking jars, platters. I used to have lamps on that, but they're candle or rushlight holders. I've left rushlight holder in, except that I've just had a short article published on some pieces that we had, and I sent it to Randall offline, and he was very sweet about it, and he says, love to get the book, but I still think they're candle holders and not rushlight holders. So it's like, okay, fine. So what I have to do really is get one made, get a couple made by UCD experimental people, and stick a rushlight in it and see does it work. Reinald says rushlights have to sit at 45-degree angle. I'm doubtful as to whether wax candles were actually available in rural Wexford in the 1300s. I'd have my doubts, like, you know, that they're that posh. Now, a couple of illustrations just to show you that there's contemporary paintings and pictures of Ireland showing that their pottery is not being used, okay? Showing that it's not there. So for example, this is a really, and I'm sure you've read it, this is a really disgusting story by Geraldus Cambrensis. Now he says it's about the people in Donegal, I'm not sure that he's right, but it's one of these, as they call it, a cartoon, which doesn't mean it's funny, but it's the whole story in one piece. And it's the making of a king in Ireland, according to him, in 1188. And so the king, who's on our right-hand side here with the beard, apparently, in order to make the king mates with a white horse. The horse is then killed and chopped up and boiled up, made into soup. And the soup is poured into what you can clearly see is a stave-built vessel. And the king sits in it. He bathes in that water. They're obviously chewing strips off the wretched horse. But when he, it also says in it, when he wants to drink some of the soup, he dips into it with his hand. He doesn't have anything to hold it up with. He dips into it with his hand and he quaffs the soup in that way. So there's no pottery being used here. This is clearly a metal pot on a, what's the name of those things that hang up in the fireplace? Anyhow, you know what I mean. Here's the fire underneath it. And it's a really disgusting story and not fit for young ears, but anyhow. Now, this is what I try to explain to my French and English colleagues, is the way of pottery in Ireland, okay? So Ireland, 1170 AD, approximately, it's the official arrival of the Normans, and it's the introduction of glazed pottery made in Ireland for the Anglo-Normans, primarily in the Bristol style, hand-built, followed by wheel-thrown in the 13th century. Okay, so I explained to them, because they are, when you give a talk in France, you become part of that group which they call the Anglo-Saxons. They still refer to the English as the Anglo-Saxons, and the Irish, any English-speaking person is into that group. Okay, so I said to them, okay, here's the French coming in, and here's the Saxons on the outside. And I do explain to them in France, you know, you did beat the Anglo-Saxons. You took over their country, okay? And then they took over us. So get over yourselves at this stage. Now, when I say the official arrival of the Anglo-Normans, pottery was in Ireland already, and I can't deal with that in this short session of CPDs. I can only highlight it for you. I can only tell you that it's there. The 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries are the ones that we really have to concentrate on in order to get some information across. There's less pottery in the earlier period, and it's being worked on, but it's not as extensive. And in many cases, you're not going to find it in many of the excavations. The huge building boom and the glazed ware that arrived in is dated to the official Anglo-Norman period, okay? So this is disgusting, I have to say, in every sort of way. I dragged these two pictures in from a different presentation, and I thought I was being very good by putting them side by side, the drawing and the pot. You can see that the pot is pretty gaudy, really. I mean, you really have to love Leinster cookware to appreciate that. But it serves, this particular piece serves two purposes, okay? You can see the drawing obviously on the left, and you see the actual piece from which the drawing was made on the right-hand side, even down to, you see this piece here where there's a chip out on it. You see this drawing here, and you can see the chip part just taken off it, okay? And then you see on the side here, you can see the way, this is where the wooden bung would have gone in here and held the beer, wine, water, whatever it was. The reason it's this level is so that the sediment can settle in it. It's slightly flared, okay? It happens to be the only cistern or bunghole jar that I have a complete profile for. So I can't say that this is what they're all like. It's very much like, this is very much like the cooking jars. So it's impossible to tell unless you have a complete piece like this. How do you quantify? Because we're talking about quantification as well. How do you quantify them? Well, this one, it comes from Carrickmines Castle, the ill-fated Carrickmines Castle, and there are, I think, 18 bungs, okay? There's one bung to a bunghole jar, so if you have 18, you know that you had 18 bunghole jars. It's very simple like that, okay? It needs to be logical, it needs to be straightforward and easy to do. This is the, as I say, this is a very rare beast in that it's the only one that I have the profile for. This is the base, and you can only just see the tiny bit that's left on the edge there. But if you felt that, you would feel the crusty sort of sand gritted piece on the bottom, quite apart from these white bits are both quartz and mica showing in it. Now, it's a bunghole jar or cistern. You would think that it's sitting there storing something, but you can also see quite a bit of sooting on the side here. So it's been stuck in the fire or near a fire, and it may have been used to heat up the water, probably not ale, but probably wine to make it passable. I mean, look at that, 1572, where they're talking about putting lead into the acidic wine in order to make it sweet again. The wine went off very quickly, okay, very, very quickly. Beaujolais Nouveau was no great shakes. So you're having cooking jars, you're having bunghole or cisterns are the two names that you'll see for them. Oh gosh, now it's done that as well. Okay, so this is a jug. It's a very pleasing piece, I think, in that the drawing shows you where we have the pieces. We have a bit more here from the handle. So handles on one side, spouts on the other. Here's your inside, here's your outside. And in something like that, then you bring the drawing down as far as you can to show what the decoration is on it. Most of the Leinster cookware jugs are very interesting in that they have almost always a decoration around the top and a pulled spout. I'm not using the word ever again, a simple pulled spout, because it's not simple. It's very easy. It would be very easy to pull that off. That's a good round piece, but it would be very easy to pull a spout and pull it out of its roundness. It's gently made and it's sort of pressed out a bit here. You can see how well it works. Now, you don't actually need a spout in order to pour, but that's what they felt they wanted to have. Look at that. Is there anything Irish about that decoration or the pieces here? There's nothing really Irish about it. So even the Leinster cookware, which is the locally made ware, doesn't have anything that is Gaelic, Irish, whatever. This is one, again, from Carrickmines Castle. It was a very large excavation and a very large assemblage, I should say, 30,000 pieces, I think. But about 85, 90% of it was, but no, not as much as that. About 80% of it was Leinster cookware. Now, some people have said to me, and Christine Baker did Merrion Castle at the same time, and she brought up a really helpful question. and I had done both Nanger and another castle site, all in that South Dublin area, not very far from each other. And she sort of said, why in a prestigious castle site do you have so much Leinster cookware? Well, medieval society is a pyramid, and there are very few people on the top, and there's an awful lot of people on the bottom to keep the top going, looking flash at their fancy tables. So these are not necessarily being used, and most likely not being used on the top table. But there's an awful lot in Carrickmines Castle, for example. There's an awful lot of soldiers, there's workmen, there are people there, and you need jugs, you need pots and pans for all of them. Okay, that's why you have 18 cisterns, 19 cisterns in the place to pour the water out of. And so you have all that maintenance material on the top table. You're going to have silver, you're going to have glass, you're going to have pewter. Middle tables, you'll probably have stave-built vessels. But again, a lot of it is trying to be better than the next person. And I think in Merrion Castle, which is quite close to here, Merrion, Carrickmines, they were large assemblages. If you took a point with a compass between there, you would have a very, very, very good living for a Leinster cookingware potter supplying all those sites with material. Okay, so it makes sense. They didn't have to go more than about 10 miles to any of those to supply their goods to them. And so this rats. So this is a piece. This is. We think that this is the shape. Okay. This is what we have. This is very rounded here, coming down here. And if you take that, this is the handle, and there's one handle, and it's opposite the. That's what we deduced from it. It could be a completely different shape, and it might not be heart-shaped at all. We don't know. But we had this piece, and if you continue on your drawing there, and then bring it back so that it comes to the handle on the other side, that's what we could make out with it. And you can see an interesting small handle, probably just projecting a bit more out here and not any more than that. You can see it's not very deep, and it doesn't have any burning on it either. So I don't know what was in it. Possibly, the Sunday roast is in it, and it holds the juices from it. There may have been a spout, for example, a little sort of, that some of them do have that, a little sort of rounded place where you could hold it here and tip it up and get the gravy coming out of it. I don't know. We don't know. It's the only piece we have that is that shaped. Again, Carrickmines Castle, a really very nice piece. And again, that white and sparkly, you can see the sparkly bits, and you can see how coarse the clay is in this one. No glaze on any of them, although there are some pieces that are glazed in the southeast. Reinald reminded me of that the other day. Now you can see also it's useful. It's good numbering, in fact, and you can see context 1794. And then this one is 847. So the three pieces come together in the second stage when you start sorting your material and you start laying out pieces on a table and finding that bits go together from different contexts. Okay. And so what I do, as soon as I find that out, when I'm on the second sort, I will create a list, but I will also send that list immediately. I will notify the excavator. So as they're writing it up, they will know what contexts have a link based on pottery. And it's very important to do that so that they can realize, oh my God, there's been a complete mess. That should be a different number, or you know, something happened, or that's the day there was a storm on the site, or that's the day, you know, Billy went mad and tore the place apart and emptied the table on the ground, and we never got the pieces back together. But the other thing I would say on this is, although the numbering is clear and is good, it would be preferable if it wasn't inside here. What you try to do is you try to number in a way that the numbers are not shown when a piece is displayed. Okay, so what you try to do is the number would be better probably just on the outside. With Leinster cookware, it's very hard to number on the base. You can do that on a lot of other things, but it's so gritty, you really can't number on the base. So a discrete numbering probably on the low down, sort of this level here, where it wouldn't be quite so visible, would be better. Just to bear in mind when you're numbering pieces, okay? Now, pause. Pause for a cat. Okay, this is just a, there's always one disgusting cat which is licking its nether regions. This one is tidying up and feeding the birds. Hard to tell why. No, this one is having putting the rats out. This looks like bread being made, and so on. So any questions on Leinster cookingware? Right, again, don't panic. Do not write it down, don't panic. All this information is on the sheets I gave you. Okay, so don't panic about it. So this is medieval glazed, these are medieval glazed wares in Ireland that you need to know about, okay, 12th to 14th century. The principal one that we have is Bristol ham green. It's known as ham green. I put Bristol in front of it to remind you where it actually comes from. And it dates from about 1120, well before the invasion of Ireland, to about 1275, okay? So it's coming in well before there are good trade relations between Britain and Ireland at that stage. There's no hassle, if you like. People are coming back and forth. People are trading. And what happened with the invasion is simply a typical sharing of soldiers. You come and help me with mine, I'll come and help you with yours. And basically it just went badly wrong. And when Durham of Morrow went to get help, which is what they would have done back and forth to Wales and so on, the people that were coming in decided, actually, we'd like to stay. And we'd like to take a bit more. And the king said, yeah, but if you're going over there, it can't be yours, it's going to be mine. And I know I can hear people screaming, saying that's not quite how the invasion went, but essentially that's the sort of thing that was happening. They were coming back and forth to each other. They were moving back and forth. There wasn't any real hostility as to using pottery or bringing pottery in. Now, where are you finding it? And I'll show you slightly later. One of our difficulties in Ireland is that in Dublin, we don't have a lot of pottery from the 12th century. We have it from the 11th and earlier, but the 12th century is a bit of a mystery. And I'm going to be referencing 3 cities. And it's not because the other cities aren't important, but 3 cities, Dublin, Waterford and Cork. And you can see how they cover that right-hand side of the country, which is so close to both France and to England. Waterford has an excellent series of contexts from the right through the 12th, late 11th, 12th. It doesn't have the earlier material. One of the reasons it doesn't have the earlier material is because when the excavation happened there, they weren't digging in the earlier period, in the earlier part of the city. Okay, that earlier section down on the corner, and I'll show you on the map, is actually covered with buildings that were not, that are staying there. And so the area that came up for excavation was slightly later, but it means that there's a fantastic sequence of late 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th century in Waterford. And basically, the pottery from Cork, which had been excavated earlier, and the pottery from Dublin, which had also been excavated earlier, is studied and is written up and is dated in light of Waterford. Okay, and I was very, very fortunate to be involved and to start my journey in pottery in Waterford. So on large assemblages, 20,000 here, 10,000 there, that sort of thing, instead of tiny sites with 50 shirts. Very difficult to learn from that, I think. So bear that in mind, please, that a lot of excavation had happened in other parts of the country, such as Limerick, such as Galway, but all of the pottery that's written up, the medieval glazewares in Ireland, are written up in light of the excavations in the city square in Waterford, for a number of reasons, not least because of an absolutely super collection of dendrodates. Okay, so it's very, very, very well dated, and that's where you start with what you're looking at. So Bristol Ham Green, followed by Bristol Redcliffe, and Redcliffe is a suburb of the city of Bristol. And while the excavations were happening in Waterford, they were excavating in Redcliffe, and they, by the timbers that they were finding there, they were actually redating Ham Green, and Morris was actually finding on Waterford, the Waterford site, he was actually finding evidence for the pottery being much earlier. If you read the publications that have come out, the older publications, they will say the Bristol Ham Green dates to 1250 onwards. Okay, but based on Waterford and the contemporary excavations in Redcliffe, it's pushed back by 100 years. Okay, so the second one that we do get quite a bit of is called Minety ware. Minty ware. Sorry, I never know. We try to say Minety or Minety, but I looked up at one stage. But it's called Minty ware because it's an area where there's mint, apparently. It's not any more exotic than that. Okay, and I'll show you a piece of that. We get quite a bit of that in Ireland. Miscellaneous French, don't worry about these. These are ones that I'll show you. They're whitewares, basically. They're whitewares, but other than the Saintonge area. This is our main one that we need to worry about. Saintonge and Saintonge is an area around the town of Saintes, which is just north of Bordeaux. But there's a much wider area there of small villages, towns, Cognac, Sadarac, a whole series of towns like that are all producing their own pottery, and it's very, very, very similar. And the more I look at it, the less certain I am of calling Saintonge, which is not very helpful to anybody. So you've got mottled green glaze, you've got polychrome, several colors, sgraffito, scratched, all over green or green painted, and a red ware, which is an interesting one. And these ones specifically, these highly decorated ones, specifically date late 13th to early 14th century. And they're a very useful indication of date. In Waterford, some in Dublin and a little bit in Cork, Flemish highly decorated wares. Just if you go to the museum, you'll see some very fine pieces there, mid 13th to the mid 14th century. And they're red, bright red, okay? And then German Paffrath, we just have one little funny type. I don't think I have a picture here, but it's a little, it's like a small little cup. It's debatable how they came into us because they're quite far across into Europe. And so then with these imported ones, you have Anglo-Norman wares in the large urban centres. So it's being made in Dublin, it's being made in Waterford, Kilkenny, definitely, Cork, Limerick, etc. And I should add into that, obviously, I'm being very particular there, but obviously Drogheda is the most important one now for us, in that Kilkenny has a kiln, but Drogheda has 13 kilns, I think, which are, my understanding is their material is finally being washed and dried to be stored in the museum. Whether anything is going to be written about it, I don't know, which is a real problem. Now, this, as they say, is from my book. And everybody should be able to say that, I think. That's my book. So this is a collection of that I had photographed for the inside of the wood key book, and I don't think they thought it was funny that I put a little face in the top here, sort of peering out. I felt like that was me after sort of 3 years in the basement in Marion Row, fairly grim sort of place. So here is your typical French jug, your Saint-Ange jug. Okay, there's your typical one, big, tall, standing on a flat splayed base, right? Plain handle, nothing. Very occasionally there's something on the side there, a big tall thing, and a big wine jug. As you can see, even from here, a lousy spout, okay? Absolutely lousy spout. But potters are very conservative, as they say, and they make what they make, and unless somebody asks for something different, they don't make any different. This I like because it's a very different one. It's a French one with, I think you can see, this is a hollow rod handle. If you can see the little blackness there, that shows you where it's hollow. These ones, I haven't identified where they come from yet. This is another French one. Yes, I haven't identified that either, although they do have it in Bristol, where they call it BPT 192. Great name. I know. Well, the reason they did that was because when they were working originally, setting up computer systems, you could only feed a number. It couldn't take a name, which computers are vastly improved now. And it was one that they were finding on a regular basis. I would say that approximately, certainly in Cork, approximately 40% of our pre-Saint-Ange pottery is this. So it's really important to us, okay? And then this is a piece of Leinster cookingware, looking very sad, lying on its side here. And then this is a Dublin type cooking pot. Wheel thrown, yes, you can see that, no glazing on it. And a nice storage pot up here from Dublin, made in the same way as a cooking pot, shaped the same, okay? But what they tend to do is just a bit of glaze around the edge, just to show perhaps the difference, or it would be nice stored on a shelf when it's put together like this. This is a very, very interesting English one. I don't know where it comes from. I haven't identified that one yet. And two, this is a Dublin one, but this is a ham green, and you'll see a picture of this in a second. This is the way that they used to be put together back in the 70s and 80s, where you would infill with plaster and show that it's not original in it. These ones are put together by me illegally with so in fact I'll show you what I do for them. so long as you promise you never saw what that was, okay? The theory is that it's not reversible. And my answer to that is, why would I want to reverse it? And secondly, yes, it is reversible. There is actually a compound that they produce that will reverse the material. The difficulty with it is that because it's such a strong bond, it's very often stronger than the pottery on either side, and that does create a problem. But if you're not moving it around too much and you're just placing it where it should be, then you're okay. This is a very, very unusual piece that I had great fun making all the pieces in it. They were all over the place. This is about 40 small fragments that have been found. This was on display as a part of a louver or roof furniture, and this is a big handle that I found somewhere else. And my life was sad enough that I found the spout on it, and the day I found the handle was a 10 to 2, I remember still, was a 10 to 2 in Marion Row, and I'd nobody to tell until 2 o'clock. So at 2 o'clock, I rang Reinl and said, I found a handle. And he knew exactly who it was, and he came tearing round me. And it was a rather sad sight watching the two of us dancing around in the basement in Marion Row, looking at this piece that suddenly you saw what it was. Okay, it's a very unusual spout on it. And the evidence that I have is that there are actually 3 of these jugs. They're jugs, 3 of these French jugs in Dublin. And I begrudge them every single one, okay? But I cannot find out where they're from in France. Yes, I have had some chemical analysis done. So that's the piece that you found. So this is your Bristol Ham Green B jug, okay? Dating approximately from the invasion, if you like, to about 1250. It's hand-built. It's got a grey firing fabric. There's a strap handle which is decorated. There's an applied spout. They take a piece of clay and stick it onto it, and then they poke a finger or a stick or something like that inside to make a hole so that it will pour out. The important thing about ham green is 2 pieces, one of which I put in and not the other one. I hope you can see this is a lightly thumbed base or frilled base, okay? That's very distinctive of ham green B. And the second thing is, I know you can see this, there's a slight ridge around the edge of the jug, around the top of the jug. And that's always on ham green B. The difficulty for us in Ireland is that because the pottery that was made here was made by potters from Bristol, by and large, they're making the same pottery. And so you have to look at the clay very clearly to see what the difference is, okay? So I'm only giving you the ham green B jug. Ham green A is a much plainer one. And again, when we're handling it, I'll show you the difference. One of the differences is a plain base or a base with rouletting on it. And if anybody doesn't know what rouletting is, then put your hand up and shriek at me or do something like that. On these vessels, you'll also have applied decoration or plastic decoration, pieces put on like hunting jugs and so on. The decoration here, and I'll show you this again in more detail, the decoration is very, very consistent. There's a whole series that are pretty much the same. And then very briefly, this is your Menity type from North Wiltshire. They're no longer calling it Menity type, now they're calling it North Wiltshire because, again, it's not just found in the little town of Menty. We get it from the 12th to the 13th century in Ireland, and it's hand-built. And the reason I say 12th to 13th century is because in the 15th and 16th century, it's being found in Oxford, still made as a hand-built piece because it works. That's the way they like it. Grey firing clay and limestone. So the inside is very, very pitted. This very attractive combed decoration all over the pot. And if you remember right at the beginning, the potters of Barhaby, they're doing this sort of combing on it. And this is right around the belly of the pot, near the bottom here. So they're going back and forth here, decorating within those two bands. And it just means that that's where it comes from. You know, it isn't secret information for whatever. That's what it is. So you'll have rod handles followed by something like this, which is a U-shaped strap handle. So it's a flat handle that has been curled up, and it's actually very pleasing to hold it, get your hand under it, and very often tubular spouts rather than a pull spout. Now, okay, immediately into Dublin. But if you looked at the ham green B one that I had, here is your funny rim piece, your funny sort of bulging piece under the rim. Now, in this case, what they've done is they have a pull spout, but I have the drawing of it, and you'll be able to see how distorted they've made it. But this is the sort of frilled base that you'll have on ham green B and Dublin type courseware, Dublin type courseware. And I'll explain these three in a second. See how distorted that is here. These are the decorations on the handles. Now that's very, very, very like the Leinster cookingware that I showed you a couple of minutes ago. Just those three lines of decoration. And they really have an eye for the decoration, because they'll either do a single line like so, or three. Two is angled in order to make it look right, or it's dashed like this and a slash down the center. You don't really use, less often you have two, and more often you have an uneven number, which is actually a more pleasing group of numbers to have, group of decorations. So these are Dublin type courseware jugs with their handles. Quite a variety. You can see some have spouts on them, and here some don't. Some have a pull spout. So there's a whole variety of them. And this is the sad sort of thing what you do when you're sitting in the basement. These are the most commonly found motifs. And of course, once I'd finished doing the picture, this was my picture taken and redone by a draftsman. So it looks a bit better than what I would have done. As soon as I'd done all that list, I found different ones that didn't fit into it, including Kilkenny, of course. So you'll have absolutely plain, you'll have one set of, two sets, three sets of stabbing, slashing, or slashing and stabbing, slashing and a line. Then you'll have plain lines, rarely this one. And then you'll have, this is the most common in Ireland in the mid 13th century, this one. And it comes from Bristol, or does it go to Bristol? I don't know. Okay. Now, and so you'll see there's the type of picture, there's the type of drawing that you have, there's the type of decoration as it looks. This is a very sloppy decoration here, like bad Monday morning after a bad pint. This one is equally bad. You've got one here, but you haven't left enough room. You put this one here, and you don't have room for the third to go all the way down there. And obviously they don't sort of mash it back up again and start again, which is a bit annoying. And here again, you can see applied spouts much better. Here's this pulled spout, very well done. And then a series of, this is a herringbone sort of decoration, and single dash and single slash here. Now, I think we might pause for a cup of coffee, toilet break, whatever you want to do.
Just before we pause there, Claire, I think there was a question in the chat. Hold on. So from Bridget and Robin there.
Oh yes.
Do you not have to have a license to alter or
yes,
do
you
any
do.
kind of reconstruction? Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Perfect.
Yes, you do. Absolutely. But I did all those while I was in the museum, prepared them for the museum, and they're all on display in the National Museum now. And my answer in many ways is I gave one to the Conservation Department back in, when did I start there? I gave one to the Conservation Department back in 1998, I think, to put together properly. And I haven't seen it again, and it's not on display. So it's not been finished. It hasn't been done. Okay? So yes, they've become much more strict about reconstruction, but I have to say I grew up in a, well, I came into archaeology at a time where you didn't need to have a license. And I worked with Maurice Hurley, and I'm not putting him in the middle of shit or anything like that, but all of his conservation of leather and wood and anything that needs to be done like that, he carried it out with my sister Sarah. The leather was all soaked in the correct polyethylene glycol. It was then frozen in my aunt's freezer in Washford, and on a Friday evening we would every so often bring a batch of material back and stop in the Department of Agriculture in UCC, where they would freeze dry it for us. And then we would pick it up and bring it back to Washford, and we would oil it with neatsfoot oil. Sarah would oil it with neatsfoot oil. All of the timber artifacts from Waterford were conserved in that way. And they're all on display in the museum in Waterford, including an extraordinary piece, which is an almost complete wooden mazer, which is a bowl the shape of the Ardagh chalice, or one of those really big ones. And it was well enough done by somebody who was not qualified, that it completely fitted together and has been finished and polished to a high standard and has not required any further intervention after 30 years. I'm not denying that conservators are important, and that proper conservation shouldn't be done, but there is also a time factor involved in many things. Hi, Connor.
Hi, just a quick question following up on that one about licensing. I've not had to do that. So can I query, are we asked to identify, like just say, I would like to glue ceramics together from this excavation? Are you saying I would like 147B to be glued to 147A? Next line, I would like to join such and such to such and such. So I'm not having been through this. Can anybody give guidance as to the level of detail that the museum are likely to require if one is requesting? Because obviously it's a progressive thing. You're working through an assemblage, and it would be we'll say, irksome to have to go back and note all 1,500 potential joins, list them sherd by sherd. So I'm not sure. I can see where the museum is coming from, but I'm just wondering where the practicalities lie on this. If anybody has any hands-on experience that could guide. Thanks.
I'd be interested to know as well. Thank you. Okay, we take a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Will we come back for just after 15:15 there? Just a little over
Yep.
5 minutes? Yeah.
Yep, perfect. Okay, that's a fantastic break in between times, because two things have been sent to me which answer a lot of the questions. Okay, the license to alter application form, it says, this includes, though not exclusively, attaching pottery sherds together using adhesive, all right? And the relevant numbers should be clearly indicated. Up to a maximum of 5 sites can be submitted per application if the objects are going to the same specialist for the same purpose or type of analysis. But every single number has to be listed. Now, the problem is, of course, with that, for me, when the material is coming to me and I sort it, for example, I sort the pottery, I may find something in a different context that, as I showed you with that Leinster cookware, that sort of heart-shaped dish, there may be a problem there where you didn't realize when you were doing the excavation or when you were processing pottery. I do realize when I'm coming through the second sort. My question to the museum would be, do I have to then submit a second license to alter on pieces like that when all numbers need to be sorted out? I think possibly that they would accept, I don't want to prejudge it, but I think they would accept that the pieces that were listed have been listed. And then if I then create a list of what actually went together in the end, in the same way that, for example, if I have a license to alter and send a piece of pottery for thin sectioning or for chemical analysis, I'm then obliged to send, I'm then required to send that report following the license to alter. I'm obliged to send that report to the National Museum, which I've done every time that I have done something like that. So I think there is a way through some of it. But it's clear, and I'm glad for having gone through that, it's clear that putting pieces of pottery together does not actually need to be necessarily done by a conservation specialist. And the second thing that I've got, which makes me very happy, Lauren, thank you so much. My rushlight candlelight holder, Brendan had apparently, because he had made a piece in UCD and he made it at the angle of the hollow that's in the lamp, and he burned a rushlight in it, and it's not at the 45-degree angle, and it works fine. So Lauren, thank you very much, and I will be very happy to send that little video to my dear friend Lionel O'Flynn to say that it could very possibly be a rushlight holder, and I'm okay. So what I didn't want to call them were lamps, because they clearly didn't function in the same way as a medieval lamp as we know it, which would hold, which was a cup which held oil and had a wick hanging from the side of it. They were definitely not that. So that's an encouraging thing to have. Okay, so these are some very pleasing pieces. None of these, although they're very, in many excavations, these would be considered very complete and so on. Obviously, because there's so much more in the excavation in Dublin, these ones have not been put on display, and they are stored away. But one of the things that still remains to be done in the museum is all the material that was illustrated was moved to the quartermaster stores with all of the rest of the medieval pottery, both from the basement in Merrion Row and from upstairs in the museum down by the station, sorry, and from the basement in Kildare Street. There was a considerable amount of material on shelves down there, and I had a lovely day walking through and just taking everything off the shelf and putting it out to one side. And Maggie Lannon organised that and got it all sent down for me. So it's all in the one place. What needs to be done, in fact, is somebody to take each page from the book that I have here and take the illustration and make sure that every single piece that has been illustrated is in that box there together on a consistent basis. And that hasn't been done yet. So that's one way of presenting material to the museum. It can be in a slightly open box, but if a piece has been illustrated, it should be available, because some of these pieces are suitable for display purposes. Now, I just wanted to show you one or two pieces from other places to show kind of similarities and differences. This is from, I think you can see, it's from a newspaper. It was a lovely piece that was found in Drogheda years and years and years ago, and I took a picture of this and added it in. It's very different. You see this very flat base in comparison. You also see a very nice crack coming up here, which may or may not have any problem. There may not be a crack on the inside, it may just be on the outside. Obviously from the picture, I couldn't see if there was any decoration on the handle, because this is the way it was shown to us. There's no spout. It's much more like a bottle than a jug, although by definition, a bottle would not have a handle, okay? But it's much more bottle shaped. And this, as Drogheda, would be much more influenced by Chester rather than by Ham Green, by Bristol. This is my one and only sad, pathetic, it's the only cork jug I've ever had that was complete enough to stand up. Sorry, cork. It's very disappointing, really. I do have one that I may be able to get to stand up from the most recent excavation in North Main Street, but I'll explain to you why there's so little being made there. You can see absolutely plain handle, plain jug, slightly frilled base, rounded top. There's no decoration on it that I can see. Pull spout, don't know. They had pulled and they had applied spouts. It's a rather sad little thing, but it deserves its day in the sun, which is what I gave it, standing on the pot here. This is a very well made piece, as you can see, Wexford type. A beautifully made piece, very well finished, decorated around here with a simple, before the handle goes on, as it's being finished on the wheel, it's getting a simple combing right around that centerpiece here. The handle then goes on separately, obviously, because you can see, you couldn't have done that otherwise. Sorry, I shouldn't be so pedantic about explaining that. A pull spout, this is actually a crack. It's not, it's where it was broken. It's not that it was cracked when it was pulled like that. And you can see they've got a little, what they wanted to have was a little ridge, little sort of, not a ridge, a channel in around the top here. Very handsome piece, very nicely, 3 well-made stripes going down and a little bit down here, just to sort of finish it off. Now, pause again, cats, obviously. just to think about the things. I love this guy on the door knocker, and stave built vessel, and the cat is churning the milk to make it into cream, of course. And here the cat has taken over the castle. Anybody who is really into serious archaeology and wants to be involved in buildings and castles, the cat is throwing stones down as the rat tries to get in. Okay, any questions as we go along? Okay, now we're going into French ones. That's a very, very quick skim on some of these, but I'm going to come back to them in a second and I'll explain to you why. I just want to show you what they look like first and then what we have and why we have it. You saw a similar French jug, a very, very similar French jug in the picture that I showed you that was in the Wood Key book, okay? This one is from Waterford. Do you see how similar they are? They're almost identical. This one is slightly different in that they have a thumbed strip put onto it. And when they do that, again, it's very much ones and threes. So this one will have, this one had a strip here, a strip down the center, and another strip on the other side. Okay, they understand the visual pleasing of uneven numbers that not everybody gets. This one was found in Waterford. This is a smaller version of the same thing, a little dumpy jug, and possibly it wasn't even made in Saint-Ange, in Saint itself at all. And this is a third one that was up for some query for quite a long time, because there are some that are made. I was basing what I was looking at in the on the Southampton and Exeter reports, obviously, because they had been published and they were so full of information, and they were dating these to the 14th and 15th century. But this particular jug that we had was most definitely from around 1220, that sort of period. Curiously, we found it almost in situ, the whole thing, but broken apart. And it taught me a great lesson in that we used to have a category that we called Saint-Ange unglazed. But then you suddenly realize, once you've got a piece like that, how do you tell what's on? You shouldn't separate pieces out. You should bring them all together. And so I no longer have a category called Saint-Ange unglazed. It's simply an unglazed part of the glazed vessel, the essentially glazed vessel. Okay, so what this is known as is glazing on the belly, on the front belly on it. Okay, and again, found in a pit in Waterford, just as a whole group, and so we knew it came together. But if we had separated out, we would never have found those pieces going together again. It was just by chance. This, we're not entirely sure. We think it's Saint-Ange. It's one of the very few complete pieces that we had from the site. It's a little lobed cup. I still think it's Saint-Ange, but John Hurst looked at it and he said he didn't think it was, but we'd nowhere else to put it at that stage. Now, this one, not boasting about Cork, but this is the only one known in anywhere, as far as I know. This, you can see, is a very different way of finishing the piece. And this one is called, it can be called green painted, it can be called bright green, it can be called all over green. What it's not called is mottled green, okay? These ones, you can see the mottled look on the finish. And what they've done is that they have taken copper filings and they have thrown them into the lead glaze. And so they melt into this sort of mottled finish. And it was felt by the potters, by the purchasers and so on, that this mottled finish was a enough decoration. You can see where they've been very careful as well not to go further down. The base has been left clean and clear. So the pieces, if they're stacked up or down, are not going to stick together in the kiln, which is a very sensible way to do it. In contrast, what they've done here is they've ground the copper down to very, very paste-like, added it to the glaze, and then I think it's probably painted on. Sometimes you'll see a piece and you can see almost paint marks rather than anything else. A very lumpy, badly made spout again. And you can just see here, and matching on the other side, you can just see a molded face put onto it. They're very badly made. And they're not really clear at all. They're almost like apprentice pieces. But again, see how fine that piece of pottery is. Okay, see how thin it is. That has come across the sea in a basket from probably from Bordeaux, and has been landed on the quayside in Cork and has been used there before being discarded. That's what makes me constantly astonished to see medieval pottery, how thin and fine it is in comparison to some of the really lumpish sort of pieces that are being made today. This one you can see on display in the National Museum in Dublin because I felt it needed a wider audience than it was going to get in Cork. There's a very fine display of medieval material in the National Museum, permanent display. And a lot of the pieces that I worked on in the Woodquay excavation material are on display there, plus a lot of other pieces that were prior to that. But this is on display as well, and it's a beautiful piece, primarily rescued by Rose Cleary's husband, Billy, working on the site, and smashing. This is a piece that is on display in the museum, and you can see that they've made their own museum card with this lovely logo on it. It's a very, very unusual piece, although I have found some other pieces a bit similar. This is sgraffito checkerboard, okay? So what they've done here is that they have applied a clay, they've applied a red clay, and then they've sort of cut back and forth, they've scraped back into it. And so when they glaze then with a clear lead glaze, the brown clay comes up red and the white clay comes up yellow. So it's a very interesting little piece, quite a small, not brilliantly made, as you can see. The base is not really the right size for the top. It's a bit ungainly in the way it's been made. And you can see there's a very good little piece of restoration up here. Very, very well made, very nicely made into it. And that one was on Brendan O'Riordan's site, I think, in the museum. But I included it in the Woodquay one because we were able to get a colour photograph at that stage. Now, why isn't it? Okay, whatever. Now, this is what's called polychrome, many colours, okay? Sandhurst polychrome jugs, late 13th to early 14th century. Remember I talked to you about the picture, the applied face on the green painted one. These ones are much better made, much clearer. They're found quite often in mostly Waterford, Cork and Dublin. And where you have a face on one side, you will always have a face on the other side, okay? They're very balanced in what they're doing. These are a group of jugs that were found in Southampton in a pit. And I think you can see some of the staining that's still on this. They actually had so many that were so complete, which is extraordinary when you consider that something like this would be thrown out, that they were able to take some of them and refire them. And because they were completely blackened, they had been put into a pit and they were stained with urine, which was absorbed into the pot, and the whole piece had been blackened. So they refired them and the colors came back. All the urine was fired out of it. And they took the firing and the colors came back. John Hurst used to call it very gaudy. But in the medieval period, they did paint as brightly as they possibly could. And we know on statues and various different things like that, they were very often painted rather than being left plain. So you've got stylized, this sort of foliage, you've got a stylized crest. It's not anybody's crest in particular. And you've got there's crest, and then there's a bird on this one. And they're very handsome vessels and very bright. Now, part of the reason for these is these are coming in and they're in fashion between for the late 13th to early 14th century. How do we know the date? The date was established back in the 1930s because of excavations in the Welsh castles, and those are very well documented. And these pieces of these were being found under the foundations of the Welsh castles. And I would venture to suggest you can't do much better than that. So they had the actual date on it. So these are part of what I call conspicuous consumption in the medieval period. The reason for the glazed pots is you can use something that shows that you're one step up from the unfortunates who have to use timber pots. Okay, now timber pots are actually better to drink from and can be repaired. But pottery pots, as you can see, there are problems with lead glazing. But if it's not standing in it for too long, you should be okay. And secondly, because these are not glazed on the inside, you should be okay. But you can see, for example, with this one, where it has absorbed the staining from the urine in the pit, how much the wine may have been absorbed into it, how much exchange there is with the lead, and so on. So these are conspicuous consumption in that they will be put up on the table, on the top part of the table, and it says to the person further down the table, look at me, I can afford to have these, which may have cost small money, I think, but certainly more than nothing, in that the mottled green glaze ones tend to come in and be given away, we think, with the kegs of, with the barrels of wine. So these ones can go on the top table. You have the light shining, the candlelight or the rushlight shining beside them. And you can say, I can afford to have something that breaks because I can afford to replace it. What I would really like to have is glass and silver and pewter, but I'm not wealthy enough to have that. But in the meantime, I have something fancy like this. Okay, so conspicuous consumption was not invented yesterday. And there's a number of pieces like this that are they're really gorgeous pieces. These were in a pit. In Waterford, we had quite a number in pits as well. Very large backyard pit that was adjoining several houses, and clearly had a communal. It was a communal toilet, in that I think there were 3 seats for the toilet, so you could all sit in there side by side, and the pit was filled on a regular basis, and what you had was a layer of clay coming in on top of it, creating the anaerobic conditions that we like. And when it was all taken out, it was possible to see that there was very little difference between top and bottom. So while the pit may have been built considerably earlier, the material that went into it was late 13th, early 14th, over maybe a period of 20 years, it would have just compressed down. Super things came out of it. Our arrowheads, not arrows, our bows, several bows, and a timber coin balance, a U coin balance, which is quite an extraordinary thing. This one is from Exeter, and this is really the epitome of the potter's art. You've seen this floral decoration on the piece already that I showed you. These are two minstrels here playing their various sawing away anyway, making a horrible noise. This is Madam at her window, and she could be looking out and throwing money down to them. Notice her very nice green dress, but she seems to be pouring something now. Whether she's emptying the toilet down on top of them, it's a possibility. You see that it's hollow here, so how does it work? And inside you see figures here also. This was probably made as a special gift commission piece. And what you have here is, well, I'll show you the cross section and you'll see how it actually works. You have these sort of motifs on top, again, not tied to a particular person, obviously, but just the general sort of one. Very, very difficult piece to make. When you look at it, I should go further here first. When you look at it in cross section, you see up here that the wine is poured into the top, comes down the hollow handle, and sits here, and then is poured out to this side. So this person is on the other side. There's a secondary one. Okay, so this is the other side of the vessel that from what you've seen. There's somebody else playing music here. There's probably a figure missing from here. And then there's a man on this side, I would think you could say, unless it's a bearded lady. But there's a man on this side is emptying out something here also. Now, the curious thing is the people inside are bishops, 4 bishops, naked as the day is long, and simply wearing their mitres and holding their staffs. So what they're doing inside this place with no clothing on is anybody's guess. And of course, the only way you can see them is coming up very close to the vessel and peering in on the side here. You would be able to see who was inside it. So whether it's a joke piece, whether we just don't know, but it's quite an extraordinary piece. Now, in any other language, this would be called a masterpiece, right? And we know what we understand to have as a masterpiece. It's something that you make in order to become a master at your trade. The potters did not have guilds. There weren't guilds for potters until probably the 15th century, and then in Germany. And so you didn't actually make a masterpiece to become a master potter. There's no mention of potters. There's mention of tilers, all right, but there's no mention of potters. And so this is made as a very fine piece to be given to somebody, and it is an extraordinary piece of work, but it's not a masterpiece as we know a masterpiece. So be careful in using that sort of terminology for these pieces. So that's your cross section on it, again from the other side, showing the bishops inside with their little caps, and it shows 5 different, as you can see, 5 different shields here, none of which really mean anything. They're kind of a generic sort of one there. Now, just to show you that Cork can get into the picture again, Here's one we made earlier. And this is one that was found in, I'm sure many of you have heard of, well, no, probably not. This is from Sir Henry's, which was a famous nightclub in Cork. And the excavations in North Main Street went on under that. And curiously, when the first testing went on there, Paul, can't remember his last name now, came back with about 6 pieces of pottery, including one very small piece that had this decoration on it. I had never ever seen it before. I've never seen it before. And I've sent it to my French friends and they don't know where it comes from either. Okay. And I have had chemical analysis done on it. And we started finding these knobs, and Morris and I looked at it and said, oh, we've got 2 of these vessels, because we've seen vessels like that where there are 2 knobs on either side. Okay, chimneys, I don't know what you want to call them. I don't know what they're for. You can see a hole here, but the hole is for firing. These are hollow pieces, and if you didn't put a hole there for the heat to come out, this would blow off and blow up the entire kiln of material. This is clay applied on top in a very deliberate way. Small, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it goes all the way around. And there are 1, 2, 3 layers of it. The other thing you can see here is this had a lid on it. Okay, this is a seating for a lid. So this is quite deep coming in here. A big strap handle on it and a big spout on the other side. Now, in the literature, these are called honey pots. But what they have to do with honey is anybody's guess. We don't know what they are. But the only place that we've seen them is in the Sant area. And I had a piece of this tested, and it came up as coming from not only Sant, but the only kiln that has been excavated there in La Chapelle des Pots. But the French have said, absolutely not, it's not from there. Okay, fine. This is the drawing of it from top and bottom, and you can see how carefully it's made. 1, 2, there's 4 layers on the bottom. There's 1, 2, 3, there's 6 in the middle, and there's 5 at the top. So it's very, very carefully done. Beautiful drawing, as usual. And you see where this fits around here, and this is not a break. This is where the lid, almost like a modern teapot, with a little nook on it, would fit in, slot in, and you would turn the lid so that when you poured whatever was in it, the lid would not come off. A really ingenious, beautiful piece. And then these are just three sort of ribbed areas. It's not cut into at all. Now, that's your French. And just to remind you, again, that you don't always need a pot to cook with. This fella is very comfortable. Here's this metal thing that the name of which I cannot remember, but this is a metal pot. There is no way that that is a clay pot. There could, and there sometimes were, clay pots put inside them, but you couldn't hang a clay pot like that. Nice chicken being cooked here with the flames. And again, he's sitting on a little 3-legged stool. Why? Because you can always find a level for 3 legs where you can't find a level for 4 legs. And he's drinking something, and this is very possibly a clay pot, but not necessarily. Now, these are possibly strips of flesh that are drying or something. I've never really figured out what that was. So why are we bringing in and sending out, and what are we bringing in and sending out that we're having contact with the continent? Okay, so we're getting wine from Gascony, we're getting iron from Portugal and Spain, we're getting salt, and we're getting cloth. These are the things that we're bringing in large quantities. Okay, so wine is in barrels, wooden barrels. And I think I said to you before, please don't anybody suggest to me that the wine came in the jugs. Okay, what are we exporting? We're exporting cattle hides. Our contribution to methane has been extensive for many, 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 many years. That is our money. That's what we are sending out all the time, cattle hides. Corn, oat and wheat, I don't know where we're growing that. We're salting the fish, having brought the salt in. We have hawks, which is interesting. We're sending out timber, meat, and horses. Those are our basics that we're sending out. But our cattle hides are our currency, basically. So we're working with Bristol, and we're working with Gascony. We're bringing in wine from Gascony. Now, how do we know we're bringing in wine from Gascony? Well, it's been reported, there are lovely Giraldus Cambrensis, again, tells us not only that we are, but where it's coming from. So he says, Midwest of France, I put down here, and it comes from Poitou. The strongest evidence pointing to the west of France as the origin for the Irish finds, Irish pottery, is a well-known quotation from Giraldus. So he says, the island is rich in pastures and meadows, honey and milk, and wine, but not vineyards. The island has not and never had vines and their cultivators. Imported wines, however, conveyed in the ordinary commercial way, are so abundant that you would scarcely notice that the vine was neither cultivated nor gave its fruits there. Poitou, out of its own superabundance, sends plenty of wine, and Ireland is pleased to send in return the hides of animals and the skins of flocks and wild beasts. Okay, so that's what he reckoned when he came to Ireland at the time of the invasion. So we were getting our pottery from a very different source to start with. Okay, we're getting it from Midwest France, from Poitiers, from that whole area. So it's coming out of sort of maybe Nantes, maybe and south from that. When the Anglo-Normans come, there is a change. You don't see it in the pottery until 1204, and I'll explain to you why that is now with this one. Sorry. Okay. This is a picture of, this is Speed's map of Dublin. And you can see Bridgefoot, you can see Bridge Street, the only street that was there. This is in 1610, as late as that. And you can see the merchant ships coming up here. But they're actually not a huge number coming up. The river was difficult to navigate. And it was, although you do have Merchants Quay, and it implies that there are merchants working there and bringing material and landing it here, very little could be landed in Dublin. And what was happening was the material was coming in to Dalkey, which was the nearest point, and they were landing in Dalkey, or they were transferring in ships in Dalkey right from the start. This is 1610, but back in the 1100s and 1200s, it was just as difficult. Okay, you only have one bridge still. So while they're showing large ships coming up, although this one is these ones are slightly smaller, the conditions for actually bringing material up here were unsuitable. And that, with some other factors, meant that pottery was made in Dublin from a very early period. And what you have here is, I'm probably wrong in that one, 29 is Ormonds Gate. Ormonds Gate. It's this one, I think. Okay. No, it is right there. You've got Cook 28, Cook Street, yes. This is Cook Street, where the cooks were at that stage, okay? You have Cook Street, and cooking was done there, and you would go out to get your food and bring it in the evening. You go out the gate here to James Street, and across here, Guinness breweries are here at this stage. Not at this stage, obviously. The Guinness breweries are here now, and so a considerable amount of damage has been done to the underlying archaeology. But here you had James Street, and below that here, because we have records for St. James's Abbey, we have records for who's at the bottom of this street, because they're talking about boundary people who are on the boundaries. And this is clearly a pottery street. It's called Crocker Street. Okay, and Crocker is the name that is used for crockery, for pottery, as I said to you right at the beginning. And so here they're making pottery, and they're all potters' names down along this area. Now they're making them outside the wall of Dublin, which is obviously the right way to do it. But we know that the western suburbs here were also burned in 1315 because of the Bruce invasion. They burned the western suburbs so that they could see them coming clearly, and cleared out this area so that nobody could to protect themselves a bit more. Okay, so the wall goes all the way around here, the castle's here. So the problem is, if you have to bring in your pottery, because there's not enough pottery in Dublin, you have to bring it in here, you have to unload it in Dalkey, you have to pay either for the work in unloading it and putting it into a smaller boat and bringing it up, or if you land it in Dalkey, you have to pay custom dues to the bishop who owns the area. So it's got double whammy already. So you only want to bring in something that's worth money. So very much less pottery gets into Dublin this way. And as an impetus, they start making their own pottery on the west side of Dublin immediately, almost immediately. Crocker Street is established there by 1190. We know that it's called Crocker Street, okay? And there are names of people here. The other thing that is the impetus is Dublin, as I said to you, was given to Bristol, and Bristol was a trading town, and they wanted to make this as self-sufficient as possible. And so they were setting this, developing the city, and so they're making pottery here for themselves, and they're sending it out on the Western Road. They're sending it Trim, Meath, Kildare, they're sending it out here as they go on their tours. The pottery is essentially Bristol type pottery here. So you have several reasons why there's pottery being made. And in Dublin in the 13th century, 1200s onwards, approximately 85% of the pottery is locally made. Okay, approximately 85% is locally made. It varies, but there is just the vast majority is locally made. And that's why I say to you, without being smart or anything like that about it, that's why the dating of the French wares and other wares, or dating of the local wares here, is based on the dating of the much wider variety of material in Waterford, because we have a wider range of material, and it then helps us to date the local material here in Dublin. This is Waterford in 1673. Okay. This was still very much a marsh area. There's a little stream here that was filled in afterwards. So this is your first protection. When the Vikings came and when the Anglo-Normans came, this is very much later, but this still remains. This was a boggy area, so it wasn't walled, okay? This is the River Suir coming all the way up here. And when I said to you that the material in Waterford that was excavated was not in the oldest part. This is the oldest area here first. And a number of these are churches that are, you know, you've got St. Olaf's Church, you've got the cathedral. Nobody's going to be excavating underneath that. Now, there was an excavation in the Undercroft, but that hasn't been published, unfortunately. And I will never get it right, but it's this is where was excavated, I think, but I'll probably be told I'm wrong. So that, I think, is St. Peter's Church here. So it was 3 city squares here. So it's up from the oldest part of the town. Timbers are fantastic. More excavation has happened here. More has happened on the upper side here. So there's been enough to compare a lot of the pieces going back and forth. Interesting to see how much of it is open gardens and not built on at all, even as late as 1673, that the housing is concentrated on this area. The difference is that these are this is 1673, and this is open for ocean-going vessels. This, I always say, is Jordan's All-American Bar, which is still on the quay. And this is where we used to come after excavation every day. And while we were there in the 1990s, at that stage, the ship that would take live cattle to North Africa would tie up outside the pub, okay? And when you consider the draft of a modern ship and the draft of a medieval vessel, you can imagine how close they can come in. They bring in their material, they land it on the quayside. And so you can bring in any number of baskets of pottery and land them on the quayside without any extra work on it at all. So it makes it easy to bring it in. Cork in 1633, for any of you that know Cork, this is Grand Parade here. This is South Main Street, which has been excavated recently. This is the area that Morris has just done. So I'm sure there's an extraordinary assemblage coming out of there. This is where we have a lot of the pieces here. My nice piece from Sir Henry's came from here, in fact. And then Morris, again, has done a lot of excavation over here on the north side of the city, on North Main Street. But what you can do here, as you can see quite clearly, ocean-going vessels, even in 1633, came up 10 miles from the ocean, from past Cove into Cork, and they come in here and they go through the gate and they land their material on the quayside again. So you sell from the quayside when you're doing something like that. You have, this is the county prison and this is the city prison, I think. And up on this height, this is the flat land down below, the Anglo-Normans decided to build on. Up here is St. Finbarr's Cathedral, and up here is the North Cathedral, the Roman Catholic Cathedral. This is where the Ostmen were put, and this is where the Irish lived. And then the Anglo-Normans lived in this bog down the centre, because even in 1633, this is called a marsh. And Cornmarket Street, which is here now, was only excavated, was only filled in, was excavated about 8 years ago. But all of this area was only filled in 1700, I think. So very, very late. So you can see the different way that you access the city, and therefore, in the case of Cork, there were only savages living outside it, clearly. And you didn't go outside the city. It was not safe. It is possible, but not certain, that there may have been a kiln here. The reason I say it is because, not that we found the pottery, this is Skiddy's castle here, but here, when Morris excavated, and I showed you, that's where the lovely green painted, Santon's green painted jug comes from, just in this area here. What was found here was a furnace, okay, for smelting metal. And if you had a furnace inside the wall here, it might be possible that there might have been a pottery kiln here. What I do know is that there's very, very little pottery being made in Cork, and it dates to a very short period of time, okay? Late 13th, early 14th century. And so this is what I constructed for basically Dublin, but it goes for everything. It's 25-year periods, which is never very safe to do. But if you look just generally on it, here's our main one in Leinster cooking ware. And that's why I say to people, it's absolutely useless for dating. If you have a site and you just have Leinster cooking ware, all I can say is that it's late 12th to 14th century. I can't give you a date any more than that, because the material is absolutely the same all the way through. Ham green bee, yes, fades in and fades out again. By 1250, it's replaced by Redcliffe, although ham green bee is made to a later stage, but Redcliffe is being made and is taking over. This is the wheel-thrown version of the pottery coming from Bristol. Okay, Sandhorse green glaze also is not very useful for dating. I fade it in from 1200, although, and the French are okay with that. I had an amusing discussion with some people from London that say it dates to 1275. Why? Because that's when they find it in London. And the concept of, you know, something not being made, something not being circulating before that is lost on them. What is useful, especially in Cork, is that we get a lot of Santonge decorated. And so you're looking at this period here, 1275 to 1325. So you can be very specific as to where you are. And if you have these sort of pieces of pottery, it will pin you down. Dublin type courseware is the corresponding material to ham green. Okay, Dublin type courseware is from 1180, and I've put it coming up as far as 1250. But I've also put Dublin type ware whizzing back to around 1200. And the reason I say that is because from the amount of material that I've looked at, and I think with a rational explanation, I think because the Bristol people came over and were making their own pottery in a greenfield site, if you like, in a greenfield, they had no competition over here. I think they probably reintroduced the wheel before it was reintroduced into Bristol. I think the ham green bee people would have been much more hardline, saying we're not going for any of that newfangled sort of nonsense that's sweeping in from Eastern England, okay? But I think in Dublin, after one generation, probably, they would have reintroduced the wheel. They would have said, that's fine, we can make it quicker, okay? So I think that Dublin type ware and the wheel-thrown wares, probably in Kilkenny, certainly not in Cork, but probably in Kilkenny, because there was no impetus on them to make local pottery. I think that the wheel was probably introduced to Ireland in the early 1200s. Now, I can't prove it. But when I talked to you originally in the first roundup, I talked about the rehydroxylation system that they were, or it's on your sheet if you want to have a look at that. The concept of finding out the water level in piece of pottery, and that will identify pieces really, really, really tightly. Now, it can't be used for pottery yet, but the day it can be used for pottery, I am submitting pieces of Irish wheel thrown pottery to see when they date to, because I think they are, I think they predate Redcliffe coming into the country. Okay, in Dublin, a small amount of Redcliffe because they're making all their own pottery here. Dublin. So what I have given the names are Dublin type courseware, so that you can recognize it easily on site. It's wheel thrown and it's quite coarse. Dublin type ware as the main wheel thrown one, and then Dublin type fineware, which again, when you look at it, you will see that it is a clean, fine clay. It's quite often underfired and not as well finished as some of the earlier material. Now, what is in this is you will see that I've put the word type, -type, after some of the names. The reason you do that in pottery studies is it shows this is pottery that's found in this area on a regular basis, but we don't have a kiln for it to prove that it's coming from there. I suppose, if you like, Leinster cookingware type should be there as well, but it's all over Leinster. And it was dated, it was named at a different time. Dublin type courseware. I have a paper, I have a short paper in the first medieval Dublin publication, where I explain that the lettering and numbers were given for the Dublin pottery originally, and I found both of them really unsatisfactory. They were A, B, and C, but they didn't include what was later found in another site, this fineware. And then when Cleana Papazian looked at it, and she again was dealing with old-fashioned computers, where you had to enter it as a number. So she had Dublin type, Dublin 2 and Dublin 3 and Dublin 4. And these, again, were not terribly satisfactory because, unfortunately, what she had done was she had put them in order of magnitude of material. So Dublin type courseware was 4, Dublin type ware was 2, Dublin type fineware was 3, and Leinster cookingware was 1. So after going completely mental over it, I decided, okay, Dublin type 1 has a name, and that's its name, Leinster cookingware. I can't be looking at it saying 4 is earlier than 2, okay? So I gave it the names that were associated with what they were called in London. London kilns have not, medieval kilns have not been found either, although the pottery has been very heavily studied. So Dublin type courseware follows the London type, which they called coarse London type, okay? And then they had London type, and then they had late London type. I decided to put the name within it, so it's courseware, and then this is fineware, so that if anybody is on the site, they can see it quite clearly. Again, you've got to have your context. If I have a piece of Dublin type fineware and a piece of Cork pottery in my hand, I can't tell the difference, okay? I have to know where it came from in the first place, because it's a clean clay, almost like a glazed red earthenware. So don't be fooled on it. And I showed you again, this is what happens then. There's a gap again of crop failure, the Bruce invasion, that pottery is not really being produced or used. There's small quantities going into the post-medieval period. And then just to show you yet another one as to whether pottery is being used in Ireland or not. Again, this cartoon that everybody knows very well. You've got your entertainment here from the two farters. You've got your harp, and you've got a juggler here. Very sophisticated dinner, in fact. This is a stave-built vessel. These are timber vessels, okay? This is the bishop and the McSweeney chief at dinner. So what they do is, they say they kill the animal and they skin it. Then they sit around the table, and in C, what they do is they tie up the skin here and cook the meat. Now, the flame is not going to be as high on that, but it's to show the flame. They want to show how good it is. Maurice Hurley, who has a rather wry sense of humor, calls this boiled baby. It's not very well boiled, obviously, but it's pretty disgusting. But it says down here, it doesn't say that in this one. One plucketh off the, but another lacking pans to boil the flesh, the hide prepares. Okay, so they don't have pans. But the other thing he says in it specifically, he says they don't eat off pewter like we do, but wooden vessels, cunningly made, and cunning at that time meant really beautifully made pieces, and he's very complimentary about them. And as I said I gave this picture to people in England who found this absolutely hysterical. I said this was absolutely the top of the range of entertainment at the time, both Britain and Ireland. It isn't the Irish being savages or anything like that. So she gave the picture, and I think her two sons were going to try to practice an accompaniment to their sister's new piano. Okay, that's the pictures that I have for you. What I want to do is have a general discussion, and I want to just talk to you a little bit about preparing for a license interview, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, so if we go out from there. Okay, now if I make that big, not me big. Oh, that isn't what I wanted to do. How do I make me small? Ooh, that's better. Well done. That looks like I can have nearly everybody on it, and I can see nearly. Hi, Lauren. Thank you very much for that video. Very good. Who else is there? Hi, Lane. And I see Laura. Hi, Connor. Connor, did you get the answer on the listing the number for the alteration?
Yeah, it does sound like they would, in theory, like to know sherd by sherd in advance before you glue anything.
Yes, they do. Which,
for workflow, could be challenging.
Completely. Okay, absolutely. I quite agree with you. But if you put all of that, I think, put everything that you think you have, and I think then if that you're sending to the specialist, or if you're doing, and then if you come back and say, when we finish doing it, in the second sort, we found these, and this is our report now showing that these are the extra pieces. I would hope that they would understand that, you know. Okay. Everybody in, gosh, there's 2 pages of you. That's a bit intimidating with all those people. Even the cat is intimidated. She's come to help me here because there's so many. Okay. Are there any questions, firstly, about that very, very, very rapid skim through Cork, Waterford, and Dublin, not being nasty to anybody else. There is material in Galway, obviously. There's some very fine material in Galway, but it's much less because it's a later foundation. Okay, and so there's much less pottery there. Limerick, there's a fair bit, and in Adair they do clearly have a pottery kiln, although it hasn't been excavated or found. I have suggested to the Limerick County archaeologist on several occasions that you know, your thing with your box going up and down, sensitivity stuff could be used on the soil, even though every last vestige of it could have been dug out from the site, but there has to be a firing somewhere there, because wasters have been found. Wasters being pieces that have blown out or broken, and because they have been found within Limerick and in the Limerick area, you can recognise a potter working for a short space of time. Very nicely made pieces, very nicely made pieces, but very often they have holes and bubbles in the clay. Michael.
Hi, Claire.
Hi.
Another very...
Thank you for your lovely email, by the way.
That's okay, pleasure. Thank you for another very interesting talk. Just following on from your last slide, do we have any notion of what the sort of everyday person was using for cooking and tablewares in that period, when Ireland was a ceramic?
Wood and metal.
Right, okay.
Wood and metal. There's a talk about, at one stage, of a within the sort of earlier traditions of somebody going to battle and chasing off after somebody who has been on a cattle raid, and they've taken the pot and they've gone away with it and so on. It's clearly not, that is clearly not a crockery pot, a pottery pot. Whoever those people were that we don't mention, we know that they were metal workers. The Celts were metal workers. Okay, see, I've said it, can't help myself. And so they were very good at metalworking. And so the problem then with metal is that you can melt it down and reuse it and reuse it and reuse it. So it's not left on site. So that's the problem with it. It was interesting to see the stuff in North Main Street at Northgate, because there were bits and scraps and rims and pieces that they were using, scrap metal, that were about to go into the furnace to melt down and make something else. So they're using timber, which they have plenty of, and they're using metal vessels to cooking, and skins. You know.
That's great. Thank you.
There was just a general question there as well, Claire, about where that wool was being exported to. I don't know if you know.
Where's that?
There was just a general question about a half an hour back when you were talking about wool, about where was the wool being exported to specifically, do you know?
I don't know where it was going specifically, okay, but it was going out. That's on the list of exports that I snagged from somewhere else. But it's cattle hides are the main one, even up as late as the 16 and 1700s, where we're selling. They're not great quality hides by any means, but we're selling hides to Pisa in Italy, for example, in huge quantities. Because you're thinking, why are we getting pottery from Pisa? And it's coming in as a chance sort of piece, but we're selling huge quantities because you make your lovely, beautiful pieces and you make your gloves and so on, but you've got to make shoes as well. You've got to make the really heavy pieces, and it doesn't matter for many pieces like that whether they've got marks on them or whether they're, you're not looking for your best piece sort of thing. You're looking for everyday, hardworking leather to go to the leather industry. So there's huge quantities going out. Michael, yes.
Sorry, just an observation, really. But there's a famous quotation from Strabo in the 1st century BC saying why the Romans shouldn't invade Britain, and the list of exports that he lists are very similar to the exports that you listed from Ireland as well. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, there's not really very much. They were bringing. I mean, we didn't have the things that they really wanted, which were minerals. I'm actually rereading, I don't know if any of you have read them, Lindsay Davis, she is writing a wonderful collection of books on Marcus Didius Falco, who is an informer, and he works for, it's when Vespasian takes on Rome, and it's hilarious. And the comments about Britain are just beyond, well, they're not beyond belief, because we know what it's like here and in Ireland. He doesn't mention Ireland because they're not involved in it, but you know, it's cold, it's wet, it's miserable. You know, the coinage with this horrible looking lump with spiky hair, badly waiting for a Roman barber to turn up and clean them up, sort of thing. And but what they're looking for is the minerals in the southwest. The very first story is called The Silver Pigs, because they're going down to the southwest and they're mining there and sending it to Rome for at that stage for Vespasian. But they're looking for minerals. And what do we have? All right, Kat.
If you can access BBC Sounds, it's actually the Falco series is serialized on Radio.
Isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it's a very good series actually.
It's brilliant.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm reading, and his adopted daughter from Britain. There's a new one just out, so I've just finished that, and then I started all over again. I know it's sad, really. I probably should read a different book, but you know, the fact that I'm reading a book at all, I suppose, is good. Okay. Okay, well, keep the questions coming. Okay, what I want to do is just talk to you very briefly about preparing for the license. What you will get is, and I didn't put one together here, but what you'll get is you'll get a tray of bits and pieces. Those of you who have done it will know this, but you'll get a tray of bits and pieces. And what I say to anybody who's starting out, and what I'm saying to you is, if you've done your license, that's fine. But if you're trying to encourage or teach people that are coming up within your own company, or somebody that will ask you for advice or anything like that, tell them that people are not, believe it or not, they're not trying to catch you out. They want to know, are you able to manage when you're out on the site by yourself? Okay, you're not going to get into trouble. And so you take something from the tray and you just hold it up and you say, okay, it's pottery. Okay, it's clay, it's fired clay, and so on. Don't ever let yourself be forced into saying, picking up a piece and saying, oh, that's Dublin typeware, okay, or Dublin type horseware. That doesn't tell them anything. They want to know that you can actually reason out the piece, okay? They want you to take a minute or two to reason it out and say, okay, and by saying it's pottery, which is self-evident, it gives you a second to think about it. Okay, it's Elaine will know this one very well. It's a piece of pottery. The curve is this way. Okay, curve is this way. put your hand around it as though you like it, and you'll see where the curve comes on the piece. Okay, this is it's glazed on the outside, and this is the inside. So it's more than likely medieval, because I know that medieval pottery was glazed on the outside as decoration, whereas post-medieval pottery was glazed on the inside for function. And as we know now, it's a really bad function, okay? Because anything sitting in it would really damage you. And that's just the people that are eating from it, not the people that are making it. Okay, so it's glazed on the outside. It looks like there's ridges and rims. It looks like it might be wheel thrown, but when you look inside, it's not really wheel thrown. It's not very evident that it's wheel thrown. I'll bring these pieces with me so you can handle all of this material when we have the 2 handling sessions. What I can see on it, so there's sort of lines, but it could be just wiping, or it could be just finished on a slow wheel. What I can see in it are specks of mica. And if I put that beside for example, if I put it beside this piece, which is white, believe it or not. Ooh, I've just seen what's on that. The whole, oh, that's, sorry. Yes, you're
Sorry,
right.
Claire, that's me. But I just, if you're showing pottery, just a little bit easier.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That the picture looks much better now. So you can see the little white specks in it. It won't be suitable until we actually handle the material, but I'll have them clearly marked for you. So you're looking at it here in cross section as well. So you're looking at it and it's grey, and you're thinking, well, Claire said that English pottery is grey, and she said that Irish pottery is red. So this one is grey. Okay, it is grey, happens to be fired that way. But when you look at it on the inside and you see the specks of mica, therefore it's not the grey that I'm thinking of. So this one is Dublin type courseware. Okay, but a grey very similar to that with none of those speckles in it would be ham green B. This one, you can see the mottling on the glaze there. That's that very mottled finish that you'll get on Saint-Ange. Is that there? I don't know. And the rim. And this one has a curious feature that I'll bring with me. I think you can see that this has been cut. This edge has been cut. It's not a broken edge at all. And it's a feature of a particular type in France that I think I've pinned down, hard to tell, but that they've cut the whole top out of it and it pours much better that way. Gosh, I should have tidied a bit more here this morning before you looked into the room, you know. This is an example of how you need to be very careful as to where something would have come from, okay? This is, I'm happy that this is Irish, all right? The light is terrible here because this is actually pink and it's not showing pink. It's a kind of a gingery sort of finish. I think you can see that outside. It's grey in cross section, but some of it is a sort of, you can see the pink here, almost like what I was showing you with North Devon, a pink and a red. Now you won't get this on the ham green pieces, okay? Nicely made. The top, you can see, has been pierced all the way through. Sometimes that happens, but it's not necessary. Where does it come from? It actually comes from Tom Fanning's desk in his office in Galway. That's where it comes from, okay? So I have no idea where it comes from. So if there was ever a reason to be careful of your context and find out your context before you try to identify something, this is one. This could come from Cork, it could come from Waterford, it could come from, I don't think it's Dublin, it could come from Kilkenny. I don't see mica in it, so I'm not. But it is wheel thrown. So just be careful of your context. And this is part of what I was talking to you about the thumbed bases. Seeing these sort of thumbing pieces going in here, marking it. Now, okay, make me small again, please, Niamh. Is that it? Remove the spotlight. That's better. Oh, sorry. This will be easier when we sit down and we talk about the different pieces. Two things I wanted to highlight to you there. One is the suggestion is that the tops of the handles were pierced in order to pin them onto the jug themselves. Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't deal with the ones that don't have any piercing on the top. So it's clearly not necessary to do that. The second one is the thumbing on the base. The suggestion is that the thumbing is there because the base itself is not flat. And so if you're putting it onto onto a table, the sort of like the three-legged stool, the thumb base will stop it from falling over. Most of them didn't have a flat table to eat on. Most of them would have put the jug on the floor in a little area. They don't really need something like that. It's probably just decorative, because why do you have then ones that don't have any marking on them? Okay, so back to the interview. They must take their time. They must hold their breath. They must not let themselves get scared. I know that when everybody goes into these, they know their legislation upside down and back to front. And sometimes they're brought down because of the artifacts. So what they need to do is pick up a piece. You don't need to bring it up like that, but this is a nail, a medieval nail that I happen to have. Sorry, Jill. So you can pick it up and you can say, well, it's metal, it's rusted, it's iron rust, I know. It seems to be fairly square-headed. It's a nail, but it's a flat piece on either side. It's not a round shank on it, although it looks complete. That's what that is. It's a nail. What date is it? I'm not entirely sure. That's me answering. So I would have to know the context in which it was found. So you'll pick a piece of pottery, say what it is. Say, for example, I know that this is, I can see that this is wheel thrown because I can see the lines inside. I can see that it's a white clay, and I know that most of the French pottery that we get in Ireland is white, although we do have some red. They're mostly white. I know that this mottled glaze is very distinctive of the type that comes from the Bordeaux area. Don't be rushed into simply jumping in and saying it's Santonge green glaze, because they want you to go out onto a site where you just don't know what you're going to expect, where you can pick up a piece of pottery or anything else and you can reason out what it is and say, because of X, because of Y, I think I'm into the medieval now. I need to stop the bulldozer coming through. I need to have a look at it. I need to have it identified. I need to say, I need to have this exactly identified before we go any further, before we scrape any more off the site. So that's really what I wanted to emphasize very much with the with the license interview. Most of you will know that already. Take your time, don't be rushed, don't be panicked into doing something. The people, and I've actually discussed this with Reinald when he was in the museum, and he said, yes, that's exactly what we want them to do. Now, I have heard since, in a more recent, what's the word, iteration, that what is also wanted is not just that if you don't know what it is, who would you ask? Okay. Okay, I would go to, I would ask Claire, or I would look at some of Claire's publications and see. They want you to be familiar with the publications. Okay, that is the word on the street that has come back to me more recently. They want you to have read the material and say, well, I know I've read part of, for Dublin, I've read part of the Wood Key book, and I know that this is what Claire identifies the stuff as, or it's identified as such. I know if I'm working in Cork, I know that this is what I'm likely to find, and this is what it will look like. Okay, so bear that in mind as you go along, and have a couple of the publications available for people to dip in and out of as they go. Okay, all right. Are you completely exhausted? Are you still there? And I'm looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible anyway in after Christmas. We'll call it after Christmas, okay?
Just a quick question from Linda there. She put it in the chat. She said, just a question on the sources of clay for medieval pottery attributed to Irish manufacture. Has there been any studies?
Not systematically, no. It hasn't been done in that. I've had some thin sections done for when I did my thesis, and we had some done around. But in order to do those studies, well, yes and no. In order to do those studies, you then have to go out and source clay in the area that you think should be used. In the new publication from Kilkenny, because Colleen had and Emma had a kiln there, they did a lot of work on trying to identify clays. Niamh Curtin did a lot of work with them on that. But the answer is no, not a systematic putting together the two of where the clay is from. Rose Cleary has been really helpful to me in looking at the Cork material. And she has said, look, this sort of clay is available in the area. One of the interesting things we had was I gave her both thin sections of both medieval and post-medieval, so a glazed red earthenware and medieval pieces. And she was able to identify in the medieval period clay coming from Youghal. And Youghal, we know, is an area where there is really good clay, and there's a long potting tradition there. Have I found pottery that is specifically Youghal? Not really, but that's something that really should be done. I mean, if you go through Youghal and you see the sort of sloblands there, that's where your clay is, no, but it should be done. There's a thesis for somebody.
Hi there.
I do have another thesis for people, but nobody's taken it up yet. Yes, I do have another one, which is a really interesting one. Yeah, on crucibles.
Sorry, Claire, Connor has a question there as well.
Sorry, yes. My brain was just ticking over in the background, and I was starting to worry about things like isotopes and that. But then I kind of, there's something I don't quite get. The clays are glacially derived. So therefore they're smushed up rock, which may be from the locality or may have been transported in. So what makes them geographically distinct? If there's, if clay is squished in the middle of Westmeath or Wexford, what makes it locally, or is it just the whole randomness of the mix that it's sufficient, you know, that the cake mix is yes, it's a mixed up cake, but it's distinctive in Westmeath or Wexford. But presumably it's not based on the rock that's underneath, because the glaciers are moving across areas, and most glacial material will carry a mix of geological sources. So I was just because I was wondering, like, whether people mapping for isotopes on soils, whether you could use that as a back mapping for pottery. But then I began to realize it's based on geology, and pottery is based on glacial clay. So I kind of got, at that stage, my brain fried, and I said, I'll ask Claire.
Thank you. And you're going to leave me with my brain fried for the weekend trying to figure that one out. Yes. Yes. But it's basically dumped. A lot of it is riverborne clay, and it's washed down, but you'll dig it out from an area where it's kind of settled in a space, I suppose, and it has become the clay of the area. What is more useful than thin section in many ways, and what we're doing certainly in France, and as I said to you before, in England, because they have whitewares, is chemical analysis, which will tell you the minerals that are in a particular one, which will make it very specific to an area. Now, my problem with my big pot from Sir Henry's is that the chemical reading on that reads exactly the same as the clay in the area around the kiln at La Chapelle des Pots. But the French say, we don't have anything made like that. So that's not very helpful to me. It's to take the clays and to take the sherds that you think are from an area. For example, when I went down through France, and I had a piece of pottery with me, and I stopped in a little village called Parthenay, and went in, and the archaeologist there, she was pulling out pieces, and I said, oh, I have that one. And she said, well, that one comes from here. They know the area where the clay was dug in the riverbed in France, that specific clay was being used, a very, what I would call, if I would be right, a silicaceous sort of clay. I'll bring a piece or two. It's a slimy looking clay. It's not a very nice looking clay, not very nicely made pots either, but they're French. They're nice. They're great. But you can pin it down sometimes. For example, the grit that is found in the North Devon gravel temperate pieces, they know where in the river that those pieces of quartz are being found, apparently. Okay, so as I said, I think the chemical analysis is better than thin sectioning, although I just get them created. I get somebody else to read them. Somebody asked me what I was getting done with the chemical analysis. I said, I'm getting another chapter in the book. Okay.
Sarah,
I'm old. I can't be doing everything, you know. Sorry, Linda.
Sorry for interrupting. I should have raised my hand. Just wanted to ask, well, the possibility of the clay having been exported from the region, would that explain why you think it's from Saintonge, but they don't have examples that look like that there?
Yes, I do. I mean, you know, for example, in that one of the problems in England at a later stage is in I think Bristol, was it? They're importing Carrickfergus clay.
Yes, yeah, that's the example I was thinking of. That's what made me think, oh gosh, well, maybe they're exporting the clay, and that's why they can attribute it to that one. Yeah.
Yes, the clay. There is a clay bed there somewhere, and it's down the road from there. Okay, I'm not going to force it on them. They don't have to have it if they don't want it. Okay. It's clearly down the road from somewhere there that somebody has made, because this is the only one that's been seen like that with those 6 knobs on it. All the others have 4 knobs. And so somebody's seen one, decided to do something very different. The decoration has not been repeated in Saintonge at all. Yet the clay matches the chemical analysis exactly. So it could very well be exported. Okay. I'm so looking forward to meeting up with everybody. This business of talking to a screen is not, it's good. It means we've got so many people together. I hope that I've given you enough to get started, to go looking, to feel more confident when you're looking at pieces of pottery that have come up from your excavation, that you can say, yes, I'm certain that this is what it is. The simple things, medieval glazed on the outside, post-medieval glazed on the inside. Some exceptions, okay? But in general, see whether something is wheel thrown or not. Be able to look at it and say with some confidence, okay? Never be afraid to say that you were wrong in it, and ask, okay? Ask somebody, anybody. Ask another friend, say, what do you think it is? And Joanna and Roseanne and myself, any of us that are working in it are very happy to help at any time, okay?
Sorry, Derek, did I see you wanted to ask a quick question there?
Yes, Claire, hi.
Hi,
Thanks,
Derek.
Steve. Uh, just a couple of questions. Just the core Dublin typeware pottery. You've got the coarse, the Dublin type, and then the Dublin fine. What inclusions are we looking at that will help settle whether it's coarse Dublin typeware or Dublin fineware? What are we looking at in the fabric that will indicate which is which?
Dublin type courseware is hand built, okay? And it's got mica in it, and it's coarse. There are stones, there are all sorts of things, sometimes quite big stones, all right? Dublin typeware is wheel thrown, and it doesn't have that in it. It's a cleaner clay. It's not entirely clean. There's mica still visible in it. And if there are stones, they are very much tinier. Dublin type fineware is a very, very, very clean clay. It's like they have sieved it, okay? Now, talking of that and how far Dublin typeware has been exported or moved or sold around the country, bear in mind that take your circle, but don't push it too far. It's not Dublin typeware if you're finding it. You will rarely find it in, for example, Dundalk, where there is a kiln, or Drogheda. Drogheda, as we know, has 13 kilns. So what you're finding in Drogheda is Drogheda ware, not Drogheda typeware. You're finding Drogheda ware. It will be slightly different in decoration and form than what's happening in Dublin. It will be less likely to be Dublin typeware. You will get a mix. You find a mix in trim, for example, where there's pottery being made there locally, trim type, but a lot of it is going across there. Bear in mind, that's where the movement of the kings, the justiciar, and so on and so forth, they're going back and forth to Dublin. And they're taking specifically from the St. James's Abbey and that area, they're taking material west with them, okay? So be sure of your context and say, look, I'm not likely, you're not going to find Cork typeware in Dublin, okay? You're not going to find Waterford type. You might find Waterford type in Dungarvan, but the Dungarvan, in Dungarvan, for example, I've seen that the pottery is slightly different from Waterford. So where I do is I name it as the local ware with the name of the town. And it's to be, and basically saying, okay, at some stage we'll figure out which one it is. But at the moment, this is what I'm calling it. Not local. I don't call it local ware as they used to. I say it's Dungarvan type. Until such time. Okay.
That's fine. Yeah, no, my lead on question for that was Drogheda and Dundalk, where I'd be working a lot and we'd be finding Dublin typeware, but it obviously it's not Dublin typeware because we've got the local kilns, so yes, so it'd be drogheda aware, but
Yes, it has to be
yeah,
drogheda aware. Yeah.
yeah,
It has to be Drogheda aware. What would be very interesting in Drogheda is there are slightly different. I've done one or two. I don't usually do that far north. There are one or two. There are some specific variations that you see on the decoration and the form and the finish and so on that make it like, no, that's not. I don't see that in Dublin, sort of thing, you know. And so I might dig out the paper I did, the last one I did, but and see if I kind of make it clear in that these are what these differences are. But obviously, you know his name, Kieran Campbell.
you're on. Kieran Campbell,
Yeah, Kieran Campbell has been studying that area for very, 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 very long time and knows his stuff. And, you know, it's unlikely that there's material being imported in there, considering that they found 13 kilns.
Yes, okay. That's great. No, thanks for that, Claire.
What we would be looking at is how far is the Drogheda stuff coming? How far west, how far south that's coming? And how far north it's going, in fact. Where is it going to, you know, with that amount of production?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, guys.
I think that might be it for today's questions, Claire.
I think it might.
But just before I let everyone go, I'm just very conscious this is going to be the last time we're here as a full group. We'll do obviously 2 more sessions, one in Limerick and one in Dublin. It's the last time we'll be here as a really large group. So just while everyone's here, just really I want to say thanks, Claire, because it's just been 3 absolutely fantastic sessions. I mean, not only are you incredibly engaging and just really nice to listen to, the wealth of knowledge you've shared with us over the last 3 sessions has been unparalleled, and I think we're all very lucky to have gotten the opportunity just to sit and listen. So Claire, sincere thanks on behalf of the II, but hopefully
carry on. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, the rest of the group don't mind me also passing on that thanks on their behalf too, because it has just been super clear.
Thank you very much. It's been great. I like nothing better for a Saturday morning than sitting here and just talking about my chosen subject, okay?
Well, super. Well, look, without too much more faff then, because you don't like it, Claire, we'll let everyone go. And we'll see you all in the new year. I'll be in touch in early January just to confirm details with everyone. But in the meantime, enjoy December. I will say enjoy Christmas. We're in December now. I can tell you to enjoy Christmas. I won't say
I will bring pottery to both sessions, and please bring some of your own pieces that you're uncertain of or that you are certain of. Okay, and we will work together, all of us, on those, and we'll work through some more stuff at the same time. Okay, bring material with you.
Super.
Okay.
All right.
Lovely messages. See you in UCD. Yes, absolutely.